A last-minute phone call from a high-ranking intelligence official prevented an international crisis in West Africa. During the ECOWAS summit, US Special Forces planned to capture Burkina Faso leader Ibrahim Traoré. But the unexpected intervention of the Wagner Group changed everything. Here are the previously undisclosed details of this covert operation that lasted for hours at Abuja International Airport. This incident, ignored by international media, but shocking intelligence circles, could mark a turning point in the power struggle between major powers in Africa. On March 5, 2023, there was unusual activity at Abuja International Airport. The ECO summit had concluded, and leaders of participating countries were arriving at the airport one by one to return to their countries. The security detail of Burkina Faso's young leader, Ibrahim Traoré, appeared more alert than usual at the entrance of the VIP terminal. 3 different sources familiar with special security details draw attention to the presence of non-ordinary security personnel at the airport that day. There were individuals around the terminal whom we had never seen before, clearly highly trained as evident from their demeanor, says a Nigerian security official working at the airport. A team of approximately 15 individuals resembling US Delta Force operators, who normally do not operate in Nigeria, were positioned around various points of the airport in civilian clothes. Thus, individuals had been detected by airport security cameras, but no notification had been made to Nigerian security officials. Similar civilian-looking security personnel were patrolling around the special hangar where Traoré's plane was parked. At first glance, this might have seemed like a standard precaution taken for the security of leaders attending the summit. However, information shared confidentially by a high-ranking official from West African security circles indicates that a much more complex scenario was being implemented at the airport that day. This was not a normal security operation. This was a capture operation. The Special Forces personnel involved were not military guards, but snipers and close protection specialists trained to neutralize a high-value target. According to a highly source from Washington, US intelligence had learned that Traoré would refuse to use the VIP terminal and would board his plane directly from the special hangar. This information had been obtained from an intelligence source within Burkina Faso security circles. The plan was to detain him for questioning during the brief period when he was separated from his guards and flight crew. The operation's code name was set as Amber Shield. But why? A former CIA analyst specializing in African politics explains, Traoré signed major agreements with Russia and China in the last 6 months. Particularly, the presence of the Wagner Group in Burkina Faso seriously jeopardizes US intelligence operations in the region. Washington wanted access to certain information in Traoré's possession. It was believed that Traoré had critical information specifically about the Wagner Group's complete operation map in Africa, agreements related to Russian nuclear technology, and China's strategic mineral investments in the Sahel region. It was also alleged that Traoré possessed a list containing the names of French intelligence agents in the region and was preparing to share this with his Russian colleagues. Although the accuracy of this information could not be confirmed, it is known that France's intelligence network in the Sahel region has suffered serious damage in recent months. The purpose of the operation was defined as questioning Traoré about his connections with terrorist organizations. Traoré, who would be taken to a US aircraft carrier in international waters, would be interrogated there by US intelligence. The operation was scheduled to be completed within 48 hours, and Traoré would be released. But during this time, information would be gathered about the Wagner Group's activities in Africa, uranium agreements with China, and the anti-French coalition in West Africa. However, before the operation could begin, an unexpected move came from Moscow. An intelligence leak within U.S. intelligence circles had caused the operation's details to reach Russia. The source of this leak is still unknown. But considering that the operation was only reported to top-level officials, it is estimated that the information leak came from a very high level. With the direct intervention of Ibrahim Traoré, the founder of the Wagner Group, an emergency plan was activated. Prigozhin had contacted the Kremlin 3 times the day before the incident and had received approval directly from Russian President Vladimir Putin. This was not just about protecting an African leader, but also critical for Russia's prestige and credibility in Africa, says a security analyst in Moscow. According to a security officer at Abuja airport, just an hour before Traoré's convoy arrived at the airport, 6 Russian citizens described as cargo coordination officers entered the airport. All identity and security checks for these individuals were expedited with special permission from the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Contrary to normal procedures, the Russians were allowed access to the VIP hangar. A security expert familiar with the Wagner Group's operations in Africa indicates that these 6 individuals were among the most elite operators of Wagner. At 15:30, Traoré's convoy arrived at the airport. While normally expected to pass through the VIP terminal, the convoy headed directly to the hangar area. This unexpected route change caught the U.S. operation team unprepared. As soon as Traoré exited the vehicle, he was surrounded by Wagner operators who had already taken position. The operators were wearing modern ballistic protection equipment and were armed with new generation Russian-made personal weapons known as Vityaz S. According to a witness, Traoré's security detail suddenly doubled. The newcomers were extremely professional and constantly scanning their surroundings. The most striking thing was the perfect coordination between them. It was as if they had rehearsed this many times before. This testimony confirms that the Wagner Group had prior knowledge of the operation and had taken countermeasures. A critical moment occurred here. There was tension between the U.S. operators around the hangar and Traoré's expanded protection. Weapons were not drawn, but both sides had taken alert positions. An international crisis was imminent. There was a very heavy tension in the air at that moment, says a diplomat present at the airport. 2 professional teams were facing each other, and even the slightest misunderstanding could have triggered an armed conflict. This tension was broken by the urgent arrival of a diplomat from the Russian embassy in Abuja. Arriving at the airport in a black Mercedes with diplomatic plates, the diplomat was taken directly to the hangar area, claiming to have documents of diplomatic importance for the president of Burkina Faso. The diplomat spoke directly with Traoré. This meeting lasted about 3 minutes. In footage captured by security cameras, the Russian diplomat can be seen whispering something into Traoré's ear. After this brief meeting, a serious change in Traoré's facial expression was observed. Looking more nervous and alert than normal, the Burkina Faso leader gave some instructions to his security team. Immediately after these instructions, the Wagner operators took a more aggressive protection formation and completely surrounded Traoré. Then Traoré headed in a different direction than previously planned. The airport tower announced that the Burkina Faso leader and his team had been taken to a special room due to a security protocol. This room was a secure area, normally reserved only for heads of state and special guests. This room, called the secure room, had no CCTV cameras, blocked cell phone signals, and was surrounded by bulletproof walls. There was a brief confusion between the U.S. operation team and Nigerian security forces. Nigerian security officials were uncomfortable with the U.S. attempting such an operation without prior notification. A high-ranking Nigerian security official says this would have meant a violation of our sovereignty. We could not accept this. African countries are no longer playground for other countries. The U.S. official thought to be directing the operation had an urgent conversation with Washington. This conversation lasted about 12 minutes via a secure satellite phone. The operation, understood to have been exposed, was cancelled. The U.S. team left the airport citing routine security support completed. Meanwhile, in the secure room, Traoré and the Wagner team were planning their next steps. Within hours, a new decision was made. Traoré would return to Burkina Faso via a Russian diplomatic courier aircraft instead of his own plane. This choice provided significant deterrence, as any intervention in this plane would mean a direct hostile act against Russia. About 2 hours after the operation was cancelled, Traoré and his team exited the secure room. However, this time the number of Wagner operators had increased. At least 12 operators formed a tight protective wall around Traoré. Additionally, 2 vehicles from the Russian diplomatic mission were included in the convoy. The convoy proceeded towards the cargo section of the airport, which was less frequently used. Here, a Tupolev F-134 type aircraft, much smaller than a standard passenger plane, was waiting. The tail number of the aircraft was associated with the Russian diplomatic courier service. Traoré boarded this aircraft along with approximately 30 Russian and Burkina guards. After completing normal takeoff procedures, the aircraft quickly left West African airspace. Interestingly, the flight plan showed the destination as Bamako, the capital of Mali, instead of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. This might have been a precaution taken to mislead any potential pursuit or intervention attempt. The most striking aspect of the incident was that this tension was not reflected in the media at all. Neither Burkina Faso, the US, nor Nigeria made an official statement on this matter. However, just 3 days after the incident, the U.S. Special Representative for West Africa was removed from his position, while the official reason was given as personal reasons. Intelligence circles suggest that this was related to the failed operation. Diplomatic circles are discussing what might have happened if this operation had been successful. A French diplomat evaluates this could have created a full diplomatic crisis in West Africa. Traoré has become the most important ally of Russia and China. In the region, any U.S. operation targeting him would have provoked a harsh reaction from these countries. Moreover, other African countries could have seen this as a potential threat to their own sovereignty. How did the Wagner Group become aware? The answer to this question remains one of the biggest mysteries in the intelligence world. In Western intelligence circles, suspicion is growing about a mole within the U.S. intelligence community. Considering that the operation's details were known to a very limited group, it is estimated that the information leak came from a very high level. After these events, Traoré further increased his security measures. At least 15 operators from the Wagner Group were added to his protection team, which consisted of elite elements from the Burkina Faso army. Additionally, a special Russian-made armored vehicle is now being used in Traoré's foreign travels. This vehicle, the Kaz Typhoon model, can provide protection even against RPG attacks and high-caliber bullets. 2 weeks after the incident, Traoré made a surprise visit to Moscow after a 2-hour meeting with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Traoré used the phrase, "True friends are revealed in difficult times." At the subsequent press conference, this statement was interpreted as an implicit acknowledgement of the secret crisis in Abuja. During this visit to Moscow, a new security agreement was signed between Burkina Faso and Russia. Although the details of the agreement were not fully disclosed, it is known that Russian military advisors will train the Burkina Faso army and Russian weapon systems will be sold to the country. It is also claimed that the Wagner Group's presence in the country has been formalized and that the group has been given some mining extraction rights. The U.S. officially categorically denies the existence of such an operation. A State Department spokesperson stated The US respects the territorial integrity and independence of sovereign states in all its international relations. The existence of such an operation is completely unfounded and is for black propaganda purposes. However, a high source in Washington made a statement saying, "Changing dynamics in Africa may sometimes require unusual measures. We evaluate all options to protect our strategic interests." This ambiguous statement neither confirms nor denies the existence of the operation, but it does show that the US is concerned about the increasing Russian and Chinese influence in Africa. Does this incident show a new dimension of US-Russia competition in Africa? International relations expert Professor Dr. Michel Dumont says absolutely the proxy war we saw in Latin America during the Cold War has now moved to Africa. However, China has also entered the game now, and the balances have become even more complex. One of the most interesting aspects of the incident was that the planned operation was extremely risky in terms of timing. Attempting such an initiative during the ECOWAS summit, when the eyes of the leaders of the region and international media were on Abuja, is not something the US would normally prefer. This shows how urgent and critical the operation was considered to be. Security analyst James Morrison, who has written a book about the Wagner Group's operations in Africa, evaluates Wagner is not just a mercenary group, but also a very effective intelligence network. They have infiltrated Western intelligence services in Africa. This situation seriously jeopardizes US and French operations. The secret crisis in Abuja is also an indicator of the rapidly declining French influence in West Africa. The successive military coups in France's former colonies in the region have significantly weakened Paris's influence in the region. Russia and China, filling the void, are increasing their influence in the region with economic and military agreements. The Sahel alliance formed by Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger has taken an explicitly anti-Western position. These three countries have demanded the removal of French soldiers from their territories and have signed military cooperation agreements with Russia. These developments are also complicating the West's counter-terrorism strategy in the region. All the details of this covert operation may never be fully known. However, what happened in Abuja that day clearly shows that the new Cold War of the 21st century is now taking place on African soil. And in this war, the role of young African leaders like Ibrahim Traoré is becoming more important than ever before.